There's a lot going on in this movie.
It was like I was watching it for the first time.
I like this movie.
It has a special place in my heart.
Very close to my heart.
This was a good one.
I want to like this movie.
What? Seriously?
I loved it.
Very flat, kind of boring.
This movie blows me away. This movie turns me on.
Terrible. It is terrible. All these keys everywhere. Influences, baby.
Huge fan.
That's it in a nutshell.
Yeah, they're dead. They're all messed up.
Boo! Hello, out there in podcast and YouTube land. You have reached Johnny Has the Keys right in the middle, the cusp, the almost here holiday of spooky season. And we're excited to be back with you guys today. This is a podcast where two guys talk about science fiction, horror films, television, key influences on those particular topics of the day, and then things that topic influence going down the line, moving forward in the timeline. And we've been doing it for quite a few years now, quite a few seasons, and Tim and I have actually been doing it personally for decades. So that's the way it rolls. But we're glad you're here. If you're new, we'd love to hear from you. How'd you hear about us? How'd you find out about us? That helps us find more new people who might be interested in the show. Just leave us a comment down below or subscribe to all those fun things. If you're returning to us, thanks for coming back and thanks for supporting us and being a part of this. We love doing it, and it's going to be a scary day today.
Yeah. Meanwhile, it is 3 days away from Halloween.
It is. Woo!
And what should we do that could be any more appropriate than the 1978 classic John Carpenter's Halloween?
Classic is a great word for this.
Yeah.
You know.
This is a Redux, folks.
Yes.
We have
Explain.
covered this movie before in our first season. And unlike my prep for most of these Reduxes that we do, I did go back and listen to chunks of our original episode on this one. And I just want to tell people, don't go listen to that. Watch this instead.
How do you know this will be better?
Well, I can tell you one thing. Your editing was great on it as far as placement of music and shots or scenes like in the background that you could hear. But the sound quality is terrible. We didn't have our format down yet. We ramble. True. It is way too long. And I was like, yeah, this is not good. Oh, and we got things wrong. I was like, I cannot believe, like, now I know what I said was not right. So do not listen to that episode.
Yes.
And I will get to that later.
You're listening to this one instead. Don't go back. Don't.
Right.
But it is a Redux. So we are redoing season one, certain episodes from season 1 and 2.
Yeah. And these, well, they're fun, and they're ones that deserve a better treatment. And wow, I just couldn't think of a better movie to watch than this one. I've probably seen this movie more than any other movie I can think of. It wouldn't surprise me.
Well, it can't compete with Jaws and Star Wars
true.
New Hope for me, but I have seen this movie quite a lot. I mean, probably over 24 times.
I was thinking I'm getting close to 30 or 40. It's a lot.
And it's great. It still works, even with some of the dated hairstyles, dated clothing, whatever. It still works because of the genius of the way it's plotted and directed and written. All the things that make good horror. Go watch this movie.
Yeah, we were talking about perfect storms prior to this.
Yeah.
Prior to our recording this. And this is a perfect storm. Every little element came together to make this what it is.
Yeah, and I have music, like tons and tons of trivia when we get there because there's lots of documentaries out about it. There's been I think, 3 different anniversary documentaries about Halloween and its influence.
That's because they always do like an anniversary DVD and want to put new material on.
Right. Let's interview John again. He's not dead yet, is he?
Yeah, Jamie. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
All right, the synopsis for those of you that have been living under a rock for 40 something years,
Yeah.
or almost 40 years. How long is it? 8, 8, 9, 8. Oh yeah, it's almost 50
Oh, yeah.
years.
It's almost
Wow.
50.
Wow. We're old.
Here we are.
I saw this movie in a theater.
I did too, in its first run.
Oh my gosh. Basically, you've got pure evil, as according to Donald Pleasant's character, Sam Loomis, has escaped from an asylum and he is stalking young girls babysitting on Halloween night. The protagonist is Laurie, played by Jamie Lee Curtis. She's babysitting two kids across the street from another friend that's babysitting a kid, and there's another friend that's just kind of kooky and sleeping around with her boyfriend in the midst of all this in the house across the street as well. I don't really know that I need to explain anymore. I mean, it is basically a stalker slash slasher movie without a lot of gore at all. It's not the traditional slasher movie as we know them now. And Michael Myers has become, in the movie that we're covering was called The Shape, but he has become one of those archetypes of horror villainy that
Huh?
was associated with others like Freddy
Michael, Jason,
Krueger,
Freddy.
Jason, Freddy. Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
So I don't.
But and you said it's not really, I mean, this is to me like the birth of slashers. This is like the, at least for me, this is when slashers came home. It's not,
Not the first, but it is definitely the one that cemented it as a subgenre, I would say.
I mean, Alfred Hitchcock had M, which is about a multiple killer. That's
He
okay.
didn't direct that. That was Fritz Lang.
Then you've got
Hitchcock did Psycho, which is very close.
Psycho, which
Yeah.
was Hitchcock, which is a multi-murder, but it doesn't. See, I always get the impression in Psycho, it's like more of a murder mystery. He is in too deep and having to figure out a way, and that way becomes killing people to keep them quiet and keep
Mhm.
the secret. There's no motive behind it of, oh, I love to kill, which
Mm-mm.
is definitely happens with multiple murderers and then the slasher genre for whatever reason, you
Or
know. And
sex
so,
equals death.
well, I mean, that's one of the tropes. I mean, I have a list of, in my
Mhm.
notes, I've got all these tropes that came from this movie. So there's all of that too, which we'll get to, I'm sure. Do you remember the first time you saw it?
Oh my
Ever?
gosh, I do. I did not see it in 1978. I saw a re-release the following year in 79.
Mm.
Um, Before I saw that re-release, I was visiting my cousin in Atlanta. She's 3 months younger than me, and she told me the entire plot. And I was like riveted. I was like, I have to see this. Why have I not seen this? And then it came around again because back then we didn't have video and it wasn't on television. And I went with Kathy McNeil and I went with Steve Rash because we were all on the swim team. And Kathy sat in between me and Steve Rash. And I think she put little fingernail scars on my right wrist because the whole time she just had both of us. And I saw it at the Volunteer Twin Cinema in Morristown.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Okay, well then I think I saw the same run because I didn't see it in 78 either. I saw it in
Mm-mm.
79 because it was my senior year. I'm old. And I saw it at the Volunteer Twin.
See, I
So
was a
that,
freshman. So,
yeah. So
yeah.
that same run of it, that re-release, which back then they used to do that, which what made it fun. You could, this was really pre VHS and all of that, definitely pre-streaming or on demand. So you had to, hopefully the movie would come back into town, as they said back then. And it did. And it's terrifying. And we both watched it dozens of times since then.
Oh, absolutely. And I think we should talk scenes because instead of me trying to give an elaborate synopsis, I think we're going to say every scene in this movie is good, pretty much.
Well, definitely all of his suspense scenes. So, I mean, I think for me, if we're going to start, I love the opening credits. I think the opening credits to this movie are brilliant. The
Hmm.
music starts in dark and black, and the music is the star of this. Music is one of the big highlights, and it's
Yeah,
off the
I
opening.
can't imagine this movie would be as good without the music. I don't think it would be.
Ding ding. Totally agree.
Mm-mm.
Totally agree. I was even going to ask that as a question. Is there another movie that's similar to that, where if you didn't have the music, the movie would not have been what it is? And of course, my first one is Jaws.
Yes, Jaws. I was thinking any other John Carpenter movie.
Well, true.
But
But
yeah.
well, like The Thing. But I think
I
The
was thinking Escape
Thing,
from New York, and yeah, but yeah.
but yeah, anyway, the music is so good, but it starts in black, you hear the music, and then you're just doing this slow push in on this jack-o'-lantern. And it's just forever and forever. And it's not until you get closer you realize that it has a slash down through. Like in addition to being cut out, it's got a big cut, like a knife cut down the center of, down the
Hmm.
side of
And
it.
it's not perfect. It's like
No.
it's like a kid carved it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And it just sets the mood perfectly. It's creepy, it's suspenseful, and we're looking at a jack-o'-lantern which has a pseudo spooky, evil connotation to it.
Hmm.
So that's one of my favorites, is the opening.
Wow. I'm going to say any scene where the Michael Myers mask is stationary and almost disembodied, like that shot behind me where it's floating behind Annie in the
When she's
doorway
in the
out.
kitchen.
Yeah, she's in the
Okay.
kitchen. He's out on the patio, and you can just see his face floating there.
Yeah.
There's also the scene where Jamie Lee Curtis is standing up, and or no, it's not when she stands up. She's already standing, but his face just fades in because Ding used a dimmer switch. That's
Yeah.
another one.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But there's also more subtle ones that are in the daylight, like when he's standing in the clothesline outside and she looks out the window,
Mm-hmm.
or when she looks across the street at the car from her school
Sitting in it.
desk and
He's
he's
standing,
just
he's
yeah,
standing
he's
there.
not moving. Or when he's standing outside from that bush on the sidewalk looking at them, and Laurie sees
Mm-hmm.
it, but the other girl, Annie, doesn't. It's almost he's so stationary. It's just like the face is floating to me, and I love
Yeah,
that.
yeah. That's
Yeah,
great. That's
yeah.
great. But the opening POV scene is one of my favorites. So the whole flashback or prequel, prologue,
When Michael was
yeah,
6 and
when
killed his
Michael was
sister.
6.
Yeah,
Yeah. Loomis's speech is still one of my favorites.
yeah.
Um,
He is
the
evil.
I looked into the blackest eyes, devil's eyes. The scene with the nurse, the driving up to the asylum attack is great.
I have some trivia about that.
Sure.
He was drunk when they filmed that. They were
Who?
worried that they were not going to be able to get his voice loud enough to be able to be heard because Donald Pleasance had had a couple bottles of wine before they shot that scene.
Before which scene?
The scene in the station wagon with the nurse.
Really?
Yeah. And I watched it looking for it and I couldn't tell, but they were really
I
worried about that scene.
I have trivia about that scene. When they break the mirror out, the window out, uh,
Mm-hmm.
they actually put a wrench in his hand to do it because they kept trying to do it with his hand and it wouldn't
Yeah.
break.
Yeah, I've
Yeah.
got to where I look for it now because I
Yeah.
know it's there. And they painted it flesh colored so you couldn't see it. And
Yeah.
with the dark lights, it's really hard to see. But yeah, because there's no way a flat hand's going to break a windshield. I mean, break a car window.
Well,
Yeah,
Michael's hand can
yeah.
because he's pure evil. I
He
mean,
can also unlock car doors and get inside them.
true. I guess you would call it I have two. One is the stalking scene when she's gone next door and Michael attacks her, and then she has to come to get the kids, and they're playing the dum
Dun,
dum
dun,
dum
dun,
dum dum
dun.
dum.
Ding,
And
ding, ding, ding,
yeah,
ding, ding.
and she's limping across the street to the door, and you see him way across the street around the house to start walking. And he's not running, he's just coming after her, and she's banging on the door and
She
saying, "Let
was
me in,
first,
let
she's
me
like,
in,
the
let me in."
keys, the keys. She
Yeah,
can't find the keys.
yeah.
And she ends up having to throw a flower pot at the window to wake Tommy up. Yeah.
That
Yeah.
scene is great.
I have several more. One that is really good, one that is funny, and one that is my absolute favorite. But I'll start with one that's really good. I love it when after Bob has been murdered and they go back up to Linda's character in bed waiting for Bob to bring her a beer, and that door just opens and there's a ghost standing there with Bob's glasses on.
Yeah, yeah.
Love that.
See anything you like? Yeah.
And we know Bob's dead and that Michael is under that sheet, and she has no idea. That
Okay.
is great.
Then I'll go rewind one scene, and that's one of my favorites. Is the scene where Bob dies,
Yeah.
and he literally impales him, and then it's just that head tilt is so good and has been so ripped off by people
Hmm.
since then, but it is so good. Just
Yeah,
like,
including Jason. Not very long after, Jason used to do that
yeah,
some too. Hmm.
but yeah, this whole looking at his work, going, huh. So if you stab them there, they die quicker, or whatever kind of thing. That was really
Yeah,
good.
or maybe
That's
he's
one of my
looking at a
favorites.
painting in a museum. Like, I
Yeah.
created that.
Oh, I did.
And then one of my funny scenes, I did mention this in the original recording we did of this, I believe, is I love Jamie Lee Curtis's acting when she's talking to Annie on the phone, and Annie tells her about Ben Tramer, and she's like twirling her hair, and she is so stoned. She
Mhm.
looks like she is literally stoned. And there was a scene prior to that where they're driving in a car smoking a joint, and they have to put it out real quick because they see Annie's dad, the cop.
Mhm. The cop.
But
Yeah.
when she's on the phone, and I guess she's been in the kitchen cutting the pumpkin or whatever, and she's just twirling her hair, and then she gets concerned because of Ben Tramer being told about her crush on him. But just, I love her. She's just wonderful in that scene to me.
I think she's great in the whole movie. I think
Yeah,
she's
she
really
is.
strong.
She really is.
The other one I have is, oh, the fluke, or call it a fluke, the whole ending, the ending montage
That's
of
my
playing
next
the
one.
music and showing just the still
Yes.
images of all these locations
Hmm.
where people got killed.
Yeah.
And what's the trivia on that? I'm sure you know it. There's trivia from that. Do you know how that scene came about? Because that wasn't in the script.
No, I'm not really sure I do.
The script called for it to be a hard cut after, as a matter of fact, it was. Blackout, credits roll, creepy music. And Carpenter was talking to Deborah about it and just said it needed
A
something
little bit
else. It needed
more.
a little bit of something. And she's the one that had the idea of, well, what if we have all of these end cuts from scenes where they just set the camera up and just shot stuff to check lighting, or
Mhm.
kept it rolling after the action was over and all that. And they're not very long, but they're a little
No,
bit. What if we edited those in?
that's awesome.
And then she and John went to Wallace, who was the editor of it too. Not
Hmm.
only did he play the shape, but he was the editor. And
He only played the shape once, but several people played the shape in this movie. But yeah,
yes, another trivia thing. But
yeah.
but yeah, so they came up with that whole idea, and it is brilliant. It just chills you every time you
Well,
watch
I was
it.
going to say it's probably my favorite thing in the entire movie is that montage at the end, because
Yeah.
it like, and that makes me think even more so that John Carpenter thinks musically, and I think musically when I write as far as the rhythm of language.
Oh,
And I
that's good
think that,
insight.
yeah, I mean, because he's like, it can't end there. The music needs to go on and then have a final when the word Halloween ends it, like an exclamation point.
Right.
So it's like,
Right.
these are all the places you saw people get killed, and then boom, the
And
end.
maybe
Yeah.
even without thinking of it, he created this whole, okay, there's a sequel. right there. That is sequel setup, perfect, but it continues the feeling of what the scene we just saw, which is where she said he is the boogeyman. She was the boogeyman. As a matter of fact, you're right. He could be anywhere. And
Hmm.
that's, to me, that is, it's scary enough that he placed this horror movie in a neighborhood. And at that time, where it could be your neighborhood, that
Hmm.
killer could be across the street killing a girl right now or whatever. And that whole proximity terror.
Back to the music, him thinking musically as far as the way this film flows, is
Yeah.
the scene prior to the montage when Loomis comes in and to the room Curtis is in, Laurie, and sees the shape standing in front of the doors, the French
Hmm.
doors. The music stops and it's
Yep.
just bang, 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 like 6 times or whatever. And you
Yep.
just see him going back and you hear him fall out the
Yep.
window and you hear him hit the ground with no music. And then Loomis looks over, the body's not there, and the music starts.
Yep.
It's
Yep.
like perfect. I'm just like,
Yep.
this is genius.
That is true. Well, and I'll go back a couple of scenes before that. The one that got me is still she has stabbed him with a coat hanger in the eyes, so he must be dead. And she goes and she leans against the jamb of the door. And in the background,
Yeah.
you see that sit up and then the head just slowly turn toward her. At the same time, you hear bum bum,
Yeah.
bum bum. It's
Oh,
great.
you're talking about when he sits up, right? I had cut
Oh,
to a
yeah.
different picture, but
And then
yeah,
stands and starts slowly coming toward her, and she's in the
he
foreground.
mirrors her movement. It's like they both stand up at the same time,
Yep.
almost.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's great.
And it's that thing of show us stuff that we know, but the cast doesn't. The protagonist or the
Hmm.
hero or whatever doesn't know. They don't know it's coming. To us, that's suspenseful. And that goes back, I mean, huge key, that goes back to that whole Hitchcock mentality
Yeah,
of don't have two people talking at a table and then suddenly a bomb blows up from underneath the desk and they're dead. Instead, start the scene, show us the bomb, then let them have their conversation. And we're dying because we're going, don't you know there's a bomb under
don't
the.
talk about baseball. There's a bomb under
Yeah.
the table. Yeah,
Yep.
yeah,
That old story. And it's so true.
yeah.
And Carpenter does it.
You're
He
not giving anything
telegraphs.
away as far as Hitchcock because there are so many ties to Hitchcock in this movie. We've got
Oh my
plenty of
gosh.
keys to go.
Oh yeah. But I think that's all my scenes as far as scenes go. I think, I mean, the only other thing I would add is favorite scenes is really just an aesthetic, which is Dean Cundy all the way through this. All of his lighting, all the setups, all the cinematography is great.
Totally. I was going to go back to a little bit of pre-production since we've done scenes, and
Yeah.
the whole perfect storm of this is not only John Carpenter and Deborah Hill who wrote the screenplay. Basically, Deborah Hill wrote all the babysitter stuff because she was a babysitter and she knew how they, worked. And
Mm-hmm.
he wrote all the suspense and backstory about Michael Myers. They merged those to make the perfect script. The music is another major component. That's also Carpenter. He composed it in 4 days. The cinematography is Dean Cundy, who has gone on to do. I mean, he was like John Carpenter's right hand man for John Carpenter's good movies, and then
Yep.
he went on and did things like Jurassic Park and other great movies.
Mm-hmm.
So we know how talented he is. But as far as this movie, it was shot in 20 days in the spring of 1978. So it was released in October of 78. I mean, they
Yep.
rushed this movie out. It was
But
budgeted
part of
at.
the good thing of that was Wallace. Wallace was on set every day, so he
Mhm.
could see what was being shot. So he said he was already editing in his mind before he
Mhm.
even actually hit the editing bay. So
Right.
that
And I
helped.
meant to mention him as well because the editing in this movie is superb. The budget was 300,000 for this 20-day shoot, and it went on to gross 47 million. In 2008, now, of course, it's a little bit later, that would have been the equivalent of $150 million. And it was one of the most successful independent films of all time up until I think Blair Witch. I want to say Blair Witch is the one that beat it.
Yeah. And one of the trivia things I looked up was, yes, it was a $300,000 budget. They tacked on, Irwin Yablans tacked on 20 grand for Pleasance,
Right.
which made it 320. But of the original 300,000, 150,000 was for the Panaglide camera.
Right. The camera.
So half of their budget went to one piece of equipment,
But
and
that's why
everything else had to come out of the other half.
But it's beautiful. I mean, it's such a beautiful film.
Oh, yeah.
It's
Yeah,
still beautiful. Even now, 50
Mhm.
years later.
It holds up so well. And I think you're right. It was a perfect storm. It was passionate people who really, really, really cared about it and had the support of somebody who knew what he wanted, but he's that typical producer from the 60s and 70s, really, of independent film saying, I got this idea here, put boobs in it. Boobs are really good. Here's all my money. Make me more money. Do your thing. Do what you do. And that's how Irwin Yablans approached it, I think, was this is very, I want a babysitter movie. Babysitters need to be killed. Hey, nobody's done a movie about Halloween, which I saw in an interview. He was stunned that nobody had
Right.
in 78.
And he actually called Carpenter, and Carpenter agreed with him, said, you're right, it should be Halloween.
Because it was originally titled something else.
The Babysitter Murders was with the working title. Yeah. I mean, that's the only title they had. Yeah,
that's going to work at the drive-in. Yeah, we love it. But he trusted Carpenter to do his thing and to take, because Carpenter was obviously very passionate about it and wanted to do it. But like you said, it's so much goes for it. It's not just Carpenter. It's Hill, it's Wallace, it's the cast, Dean Cundy. Everything. It just cannot say enough about how brilliant this movie is.
Well, let's talk about the cast then.
Sure.
Let's start off with Loomis himself. That's Donald Pleasance. We knew him, you and I knew him from Hammer movies, but America really only knew him as a James Bond villain, I would say, because he played Blofeld in You Only Live Twice. Maybe they would know him from The Great Escape. That was a good American movie as well.
Yeah.
However, we know him from Escape from New York. I know him from my fan favorite, Alone in the Dark. He played Dr. Leo Bain. We have covered that on this show.
I know him from Fantastic Voyage because
that's right. That's right. He was in that. And we've covered that as well. Did you know that he was originally chosen to play Blair in The Thing? I probably mentioned that.
You probably did, but I don't remember that.
I can't remember if I mentioned that when we did our Thing Redux or not, but his scheduling prevented him. There was a conflict from doing it, and that's why it went to Wilford Brimley. And I cannot imagine anyone better than Wilford Brimley in that role.
Oh, yeah. No, Wilford, that was better casting than Pleasant.
It would have been a little
Dracula,
odd.
too. He's in Dracula, and the Langella one. We talked about it, and the fact that he was eating something in every single scene so that they couldn't edit him out.
Right. Yeah, he's definitely got some acting tricks to keep from getting cut. But as you mentioned earlier, or no, you didn't mention this earlier. I heard this earlier on our prior podcast. John Carpenter approached Peter Cushing and Christopher Reeve to play the role. So he was looking for a Hammer actor, basically.
Christopher Lee, right? Not Reeve.
Did I say Reeve? I'm sorry. Christopher Lee's who I meant. Yeah, that'd be terrible. He was doing Superman at the time.
Probably wouldn't work. Yeah.
No. But it went to Pleasance because both of the others turned him down for the low pay. Pleasance, I don't know, you said 20,000. I've also heard 25,000, but whatever it was roughly $25,000 that Donald Pleasance was paid for 5 days, just over 18 minutes of screen time. I mentioned he was drunk in one of them.
Yep.
But Christopher Lee said that he has regretted that decision. I mean, he regretted that decision like to his dying day. He did not do this movie.
I'm sure.
Next, we have Laurie, played by Jamie Lee Curtis. For those of you out there that are young, you may not know this, but she is the daughter of Tony Curtis and Janet Leigh. They are both two golden age American movie actors. We know Jamie Lee Curtis early on from movies like Trading Spaces and A Fish Called Wanda, but it was this movie that put her on the map, I would say, more than any. And she has recently become an award-winning actress for movies like Everything Everywhere All at Once and the series The Bear, which is on FX right now.
Mm-hmm.
She is married to Christopher Guest and has been since December 18th of 1984. They have two children. Christopher Guest, for those of you that don't know, is the director of movies like Waiting for Guffman and Best in Show, very funny improv movies with Catherine O'Hara. She is the godmother of Jake Gyllenhaal and Maggie Gyllenhaal. Did you know that?
I did not know that.
I thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
This is another little story that I didn't tell in our first episode that I found fascinating. But
Yes.
Christopher Guest is British. She became formally known as the Right Hun, the Lady Haddon Guest of Salling in the country of Essex when her husband Christopher inherited the barony in 1996 on the death of his father.
What?
Yes. When making reservations in exclusive London restaurants at short notice, she gives her name as Lady Haddon Guest, which apparently works better than Jamie Lee Curtis.
I'm sure. Wow.
She is like royalty in England.
Literally royalty.
Literally, because of her marriage. I did not know that at all. She's a very private person. She doesn't put a lot out there. And I did some digging and I found that. And I was like, that is fascinating.
Land
I also
Katie
found out-
Scarlet. It's the only thing that lasts.
Yeah. And I also found out, I think I mentioned this in a podcast recently, that she's also good friends with, Clarice Starling.
Jodie Foster?
Jodie Foster. I could not think of her name. Yeah, they're good friends. But they were also child stars in a way. They grew up with young Hollywood.
Yeah, definitely.
Excuse me. She was really the only teenager at the time of shooting. She was 19. Everyone else was in their 20s already.
Hmm.
And
Okay.
she was paid $8,000.
Yeah.
A lot less than Donald Pleasance. And she's in this whole movie. So that's Jamie Lee Curtis for you. I can't say enough good things about her. She makes this movie, really.
She does.
Annie was played by Nancy Keys, who was under the name of Nancy Loomis at the time. And she is Tommy Lee Wallace's ex-wife. So they got
Yeah,
married.
there was a lot of hookups in this movie.
Well, John was known for that, but yeah. Although she played the daughter of Charles Cypher's sheriff in the original Halloween, their real life age difference is only 10 years.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just thought that was funny. And she's great. And everyone's, even all the side characters, or the minor characters, I guess you would say, are great in this. Linda is another one. She is played by PJ Souls. I knew her from Rock and Roll High School, which was a Ramones movie that came out in the late 70s. But she was also in Private Benjamin and Stripes. She was the love interest in Stripes with Bill Murray.
It's great in Stripes.
Yeah, I love that movie. She was one of hundreds of actresses that auditioned for De Palma and Lucas when they did that mass audition for Carrie and Star Wars at the same time. You remember that? And she married Dennis Quaid. I mentioned this when we covered Enemy Mine last season on a dude ranch in 1978. She was his first wife.
This same year that this came out.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. They knew each other. As a matter of fact, I have a story about, maybe in trivia, about him and her. But anyway, John Carpenter wanted her for this movie after seeing the movie Carrie in 1976. He wrote the role of Linda Vanderklok especially for her because of the way she said the word totally.
Totally.
Totally. She says it like half a dozen times in this movie.
Oh, easily. It's like every other word.
Yeah. Charles Cyphers, I mentioned earlier, played Brackett. Brackett is the sheriff that is Annie's father. He's another regular of Carpenter's. He was in The Fog. He was in Assault on Precinct 13. He also went on to do the movie Major League. Charles is a graduate of the Academy of Dramatic Arts in Los Angeles. Okay. That's his big claim to fame. Aside from his many TV and film credits, he is very proud of his body of work in the LA theater. He was a member of the company for 25 years.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
All right, so let's move on to Lindsay, the little girl that Annie is babysitting.
Yes.
Lindsay is played. She got stuck in the window, or what is he? I think that's what she says. She got stuck in the window.
She got stuck in the window.
Kyle Richards played Lindsay. Those of you that are Real Housewives fans know that she was on The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. However, she was a child actress. She was not only in this movie, she was in Escape to Witch Mountain. She was in Eaten Alive, the Tobe Hooper alligator film. And then she came back into acting more recently with these other Halloween films that came out more recently, Halloween Kills and Halloween Ends. So they resurrected the character of the adult Lindsay. She reminds me a lot of Demi Moore as an adult. She's very pretty.
Very pretty.
However, in our original episode, I mentioned that she was the little girl that got shot in Assault on Precinct 13. And I was wrong.
With the ice cream?
What's that?
With the ice cream?
Yes.
I'd like
I wanted vanilla twist. Yeah. One of our favorite scenes in a movie. That was actually her sister, Kim, who is also on The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. She was the little girl. She's a few years older, and her hair is a little blonder. And they do look alike, but I made the mistake of saying that it was Kyle that played that girl, and I was totally wrong. So that's why you don't need to listen to that episode.
Dang.
Tommy Doyle was played by Brian Andrews. He was another kid actor that didn't go much beyond his teens acting. He was in The Great Santini. He was in a movie that we liked called 3 O'Clock High.
Yeah.
He was predominantly, like I said, a child actor. And when they revived his character with Lindsay's in the latter films, he was instead played by Anthony Michael Hall. So he did not come back. Who else do I have? Okay.
That's almost everybody.
No, Bob. Bob is the guy that gets stabbed into the wall. I have that he worked at Walt Disney World in Florida for several years, most recently as Beghar in the Journey into the Jungle book at Disney's Animal Kingdom. And that must have been when they first opened, because I never have seen that ride or attraction. Oh, and here's that note I forgot about. PJ Soles was married to Dennis Quaid at the time of filming. John Carpenter and Deborah Hill wanted to cast him in the role of Bob, Dennis Quaid, that is. But unfortunately, Quaid was busy on another project, and they got John Michael Graham to play the role instead.
Okay.
Nancy Stevens played Marion, the nurse. Nancy Stevens was born on July 2nd, 1949 in Texas. She is an actress and producer known for Escape from New York, Halloween, and Halloween 2. She has been married to Rick Rosenthal since May 23rd. They have 3 kids. Rick Rosenthal is a pretty famous name. She came out of retirement as well to revive her character, Marion, in Halloween Kills. So she came back for this second trilogy of film. Arthur Mallet played the graveyard keeper. I don't really have anything on him. But Michael Myers, remember I said a lot of people played Michael Myers. Remember when he gets demasked and you see his face? That was Tony Moran. He is the elder brother of Happy Days star Aaron Moran.
Nepotistic people.
He got paid $250 for that one shot. That's
one
it.
shot. Yep.
In an interview, Moran claimed that the reason Michael Myers was played by more than one actor was because they could only use those who were available on each day of filming. He also added that Michael Myers was played by 6 actors in total, including himself, Nick Castle, and John Carpenter at one point. So,
and Deborah Hill.
And Deborah Hill, yeah, of course. And Tommy Lee Wallace.
Tommy Lee Wallace.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Michael Myers at age 6 was played by Will Sandon. And then lastly, the Shape himself was mostly Nick Castle. And Nick Castle is more of a writer and director than an actor. He wrote Skate Town, USA. He wrote Escape from New York. He wrote The Boy Who Could Fly and Escape from LA. He is known for directing The Last Starfighter, The Boy Who Could Fly, and Mr. Wrong, that Ellen DeGeneres movie.
Ellen DeGeneres. Yeah.
Yeah. Nick Castle was born on the exact same day as Stephen King, September 21st, 1947.
Wow. Okay. That's
I've
good
got
trivia.
tons of trivia. He's from a show business family. His father was also named Nick Castle. He was a vaudevillian and choreographer. He worked with Shirley Temple, Ann Miller, Gene Kelly, and Fred Astaire. So his dad was in the business too.
Another nepotism, a Nepo
Right.
baby. And I know that there's one documentary that he has a huge portion of. He has a lot of memories of the show, of the shoot itself, of things that happened and all that. And so they use him a great deal in the documentary, and it's worth it.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. He also came back to play him in some of the latter films as well. The Tom Atkins character, Nick Castle in The Fog, was named after him, quite obviously. John Carpenter liked to play with people's names. But he was also the alien in Dark Star, which could be coming up pretty soon. We
didn't mention that in in the pre-production, but basically this is Carpenter's third film. So his first one was Dark Star, which has ties to Alien and several other things, and is very similar to but anyway, that was his senior project right with USC. He was making it when he was graduating from USC, and it's very similar to what George Lucas did when he graduated USC, and his was THX 1138. Carpenter's was Dark Star, both science fiction. He one dystopian, one aboard
but one had Robert Duvall in it.
Yep. But the other one had a beach ball with claws, so that works.
Well, and that beach ball with claws was Nick Castle. He also played Michael in not only this movie, but in Halloween 2018 and Halloween Kills, and he played a flasher in Halloween Ends.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So that's what I have on cast. I do have some awards news if you want me to press on. Most of the awards obviously are posthumous DVD release type stuff. However, the Academy of Science Fiction, Fantasy, and Horror nominated this film for a Saturn Award for Best Horror Movie of 1978. However, if you remember a few episodes back when we did Magic, I mentioned that Magic was also nominated, but that it was beaten by The Wicker Man, which is very strange because The Wicker Man came out in 1973.
Yeah.
I love all these movies, but it beat Magic, Halloween, and Dawn of the Dead, and Piranha, and the Medusa Touch for the 1978 Saturn Award. Now, I looked into this because I was curious, and there was a 96-minute restored version released in 79 to critical acclaim. So maybe they're just lumping it in there because it was re-released with restored footage. I don't know.
Maybe. Are they consider it a new edit or a new version, so to speak,
I don't know.
because it has new footage?
I don't know, but even though I love The Wicker Man, it is not better than Halloween or Dawn of the Dead. So
or Magic.
I'm just saying that.
Yeah, no.
The Avoriaz Fantastic Film Festival gave John Carpenter the 1979 Critics Award. He was nominated for the Grand Prize. Carpenter also won the New Generation Award from the Los Angeles Film Critics Association. He got a lot of notice for this film, and well deserved. It was selected in 2006 for preservation in the United States National Film Registry by the Library of Congress as being culturally, historically, and aesthetically significant. And it is on the 1001 Movies You Must See Before You Die list.
Must be. Yes.
So all well deserved.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's a touchstone, and I've got in my notes too. One of the other things I love about this movie is there's very little blood in it, which should show. What's that new slasher that's out with the freaking clown, not the Hitcher or the Squealer,
The Terrifier or something.
Terrifier or whatever.
Yeah, I've not seen them.
And all the things about it is, oh, so gory, oh, so gory, oh, so gory. You don't have to be gory to be terrifying, literally terrifying, which is what this film is.
Mm.
So one of my big things about that.
Yeah.
Some trivia.
I mean, it's like one of the. I know this is gonna sound funny when we get to Keys. We'll talk about holiday horror movies, but you know how people watch "It's a Wonderful Life" at Christmas. I think people should watch this movie at Halloween.
Well, yeah,
I really do.
Of course.
Yeah,
and this one definitely before Nightmare Before Christmas or
well, I like Nightmare Before Christmas, but it should really be around Thanksgiving because it's both. It's Halloween and Christmas.
Agreed.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, this falls into those perennials of like at the Capitol, we show this movie every year along with Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the original, of course, and Psycho, all of the great horror thrillers. This was, it's a segue to Key, but I know there's trivia we're going to do too. But this one reminded me when we just said a little while ago, Michael Myers, Jason Voorhees, Freddy Krueger. They're like the new Universal monsters.
Oh, yeah. Very much so.
They're like the parallel to Frankenstein, Wolfman, Dracula.
Yeah, the main two differences are color and gore, and the fact that they're not all the same studio.
Right.
Yeah.
They came from all independents, but yeah.
But they do look like the modern equivalent of the classic movie monsters. Yeah.
It's like you said, I've got a lot of the trivia stuff is like Carpenter playing with names. Like I think you already said Haddonfield was Deborah Hill's hometown.
Something like that, yeah.
I've got Dr. Loomis is named after Janet Leigh's boyfriend from Psycho.
In Psycho, yes, Sam Loomis. Mm-hmm.
Michael Myers is actually named after the distributor in England of Assault on Precinct 13.
Exactly, a friend of John's in England.
So Laurie Strode is named after Carpenter's first girlfriend he ever had. Lots of relationships. We talked about those.
Well, John was dating Deborah Hill at the time. And then when we've since done The Fog. And and in The Fog, he had broken up with her and was dating Adrienne Barbeau. Yep. And Jamie Lee Curtis was not happy about it because she was friends with Deborah and Deborah was working on this film. And here he is with his new girlfriend working on the film. And it was like not very nice behind the scenes, or at least according to Jamie Lee Curtis.
I think we mentioned when we covered that the idea actually came from Deborah Hill and John Carpenter when they were in London. And they saw the fog roll in on Stonehenge and went, what happens if that was malevolent? That was kind of, they jointly had the idea.
For The Fog, yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And that movie came out, 2 years later from this?
Yeah.
You mentioned Freddy Krueger.
Mm-hmm.
Did you know that Robert Englund was a part of this production?
How?
Sorry, I got tongue-tied. Robert Englund of Nightmare on Elm Street revealed in an interview that John Carpenter had him throw bags of dead leaves on the set for a day. So I guess he just kind of threw him $20 and said, here, scatter these leaves. Remember? Because they filmed it in May. It was not fall, and they had to make the streets look like fall.
I think Wallace at one point mentions that they didn't even have any leaves. They had to take fresh leaves and paint them orange and red and colors brown, and then reuse them shot after shot as much as they could.
And apparently one of the leaf wranglers was Robert Englund.
Wow. And this was guerrilla filmmaking. They were shooting as much as they could, as fast as they could, everything. Right. Another reason I really like it. Because of that and the way they did that. Did you know what the original mask was that Wallace proposed? Because he went down to the store, got 2 masks and brought them back.
I read that there were like 3 up beside the Shatner one. One was Spock and one was Richard Nixon, I think. And then the
one I have in my notes is Emmett Kelly. He brought back a clown mask, an Emmett Kelly.
Yes, there was a clown mask as well.
And It was actually when they painted the Shatner mask that it worked for them. When they painted it the pale white and took some of the hair off.
They
And
made the eye holes a little larger
yeah,
too, and like
yeah.
made the hair look different.
But yes, Michael Myers is wearing a William Shatner mask.
Yeah, there's a big key to William Shatner in this movie, and from what I understand, he eventually sued them, and that does not surprise me at all. And they settled out of court, and he gave the money to charity, which I thought was admirable. But in retrospect, they were saying that they should have never settled out of court because it was technically a Captain Kirk mask, and he has no rights over that.
That's true.
It should have been Paramount that sued them, not William Shatner.
True. Makes sense.
But anyway, it's all water under the bridge, and the money went to charity. So
the budget was so slim, they had no costume coordinator or anything else, so everybody just wore their own clothes.
yeah, they gave Jamie Lee Curtis $100 to go to JCPenney's and get a wardrobe.
Yeah. Get a wardrobe. That's what you're going to wear for this movie.
Right.
There you go. And I think on the original, if I remember correctly, we talked forever about the socks, all the knee-high socks in this movie, because there's a bunch.
Yeah, and there's one scene, I think it's the scene in the classroom where she's wearing, I want to say like thick hose, because they go all the way up under her skirt and they're white.
Like
and yeah, they're like tights, but they look thick, like leg warmer kind of things. I don't know. It's weird.
Well, back then tights were very thick.
Well, and it's supposed to be cold because it's supposed to be fall. Right. It's not supposed to be Pasadena. It's supposed to be Haddonfield, Illinois.
Yeah, just ignore those palm trees in the background.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. I mentioned earlier that Deborah Hill and John Carpenter were a couple. Jamie Lee Curtis has said in interviews that they were her horror movie parents, and that when they broke up, she was devastated because she felt like she was their child, she said.
That goes into your thing of the fog. That's good.
Yeah, and she's estranged from Tony Curtis, her father. I mean, she was not estranged from her mother. So John may have been kind of a father figure to her, too, as well.
True. Could have been.
Yeah.
Well, you had mentioned that Carpenter did the music in 4 days. The trivia story I have around that one is he actually showed it to their distributor, the big studio head, showed the movie rough cut, his final director's cut of it without music.
Oh,
because he hadn't done anything yet, and showed it to her, and she hated it and said, I don't even think we can distribute this. This is terrible, da, da, da. 4 days later, he shows up and she finishes the screening and says, that's one of the most terrifying things I've ever seen in my life. And he said, I didn't change one edit. All I did was add the music.
Yeah. Yeah, you should never show a movie without music. They're always going to say
they see dailies,
bad. Yeah.
They see stuff all the time. I think that's why there's so much second guessing of artists a lot by studios and executives and all that, because they're not seeing the finished thing. They're seeing what he shot today that he's going to edit down or cut different or whatever.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of that. But yeah, she loved it and said it was terrifying.
Wow. I have one last trivia thing. It's funny to me because we always talk about musicians like Dolly Parton or Cher who have had a #1 single in 5 decades or 6 decades, or Barbra Streisand even, who had hits in 5 consecutive decades, something like that. Well, Jamie Lee Curtis has played Laurie Strode in films released in 6 different decades.
Wow.
She was in this film in 78, Halloween 2 in 81, Halloween H2O in 98, Halloween Resurrection in 2002, Halloween 2018, and Halloween Kills in 2021.
Dang.
She's been doing this character in 6 decades. She's been in a film every decade for 6 decades.
Well, I think that's probably a good segue to keys, because one of the biggest keys is the rebirth of this franchise.
Mm-hmm.
And I have not seen those. You have, and I think you liked one but didn't like the second one.
The first one was fun because they played a lot with your expectations of the camera work in the first movie.
Yeah.
They would pay homage to shots and do things to Wes Craven. How Wes Craven would play with what you anticipated with in Scream. Well, it was very much that way. But when they go on and elaborate in the second two, they're not as good. So,
Hmm.
but 2018, I would put on our list.
Well, I mean, it spawned a slew of freaking sequels, of
Well,
course. I have not seen all of them. I've probably only seen like, I think, six of them. I remember not liking two very much. I thought it was a retread, and
it's got a lot
it's
more
where,
gore in it. It's more like Friday the 13th.
yeah, and they introduced the whole "that's my sister" or whatever weird backstory, which I didn't work.
Right.
I did like three and like them trying to think outside the franchise box and let's
Mm-hmm.
do something different. There are very few of us out here who liked Halloween 3. Most
It
people
has
did
had a
not.
resurgence in popularity, or I don't know if it's a resurgence, but it's had an admiration swell. But in latter days, it was not appreciated to begin with. But there are a lot of folks out there that like it now.
But I remember not being a fan at all of the rest of the sequels that I saw, like 4, 5, and 6. I don't remember anything about them that stands out. They don't impress me. Nothing was good about it. And I hate the Rob Zombie reboots. Think it was terrible.
Yeah, it
Trying
was
to give
terrible.
Michael this whole backstory just did not work
No,
for me at
no,
all.
it's putting too much thought into it when there's very little
Yeah.
thought in this movie other than creativity. As far as other ones, I mean, I haven't seen it in ages, but I do remember liking H2O just because Jamie Lee Curtis came back for it. And that was in 1998. But I don't know that I've seen that movie since then, so it may not be any good.
Hmm.
Um, we mentioned Psycho. There's lots of ties to it. Obviously, the mental illness tie, the fact that Janet Leigh is Jamie Lee Curtis's mother, the character of Sam Loomis, which is named after the boyfriend. You mentioned William Shatner, who was the Kirk mask they used. I have one key that I think Wes Craven may have lifted is the classroom scene where Laurie is sitting in the classroom and she sees him out the window. But the reason it reminds me of Nightmare on Elm Street is that the whole time the creepiness is happening, you can hear the teacher in the background droning on about
Uh-huh.
fate. And in the Elm Street movie, she's droning on about Shakespeare's. Isn't I think it's Hamlet.
She's quoting
It's
Hamlet. Yeah.
yeah, she's like quoting Hamlet, and it's like a dream sequence type thing. So she's
Yep.
droning on about dreams, and in this, they're droning on about fate. And they're both classroom scenes, and they're very similar to me.
I agree. I agree. I think that's a great key. And also, the heroine is the only person that sees the villain, sees the entity,
Right. And no
kind
one
of
believes
thing.
her.
No one believes her. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That's a very good one. I
Yeah.
think we also have to, as a big key influence, which was actually mentioned in two different documentaries, is Touch of Evil. Because Carpenter said he wanted the first scene to be like the first scene in Touch of Evil, which is like a 4.5 minute scene, I think, in Touch of Evil.
It's the
It's
very
a
opening, isn't
single
it?
shot. It's the very opening. It's a single moving shot, and I think it's 4.5 minutes long. But it's them going through the streets and then watching the bomb that's in the trunk suddenly go across into Mexico and it blows up, and all this happens all in one huge continuous shot. So Carpenter wanted that first whole prologue sequence with young Michael to be one shot, which it looks like, but it's in reality composed of three different cuts. You just don't notice the cuts because he's going into a dark frame, around a corner, into a shadow, or whatever. But
Mm-hmm.
he had to do those cuts because the Panaglide camera was larger than he expected it to be.
But God,
And
I thank for that. I'm so thankful for that camera though, man, because this movie
oh
looks
my
so
gosh,
good because of it.
yeah. And the Michael's hands gripping the knife, reaching into the drawer and grabbing the knife, and also killing her later. Those are Deborah Hill's.
That's Deborah Hill's hands. They're very
Yeah,
well manicured, she pointed out.
yeah, yeah. Well manicured little boy hands. But yeah, Touch of Evil. I mean,
I,
there's. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, we talk about it being the movie that cemented the slasher genre, which is ironic because there's not very much gore in it. But
Right.
there is slasher movies prior to this that you could consider Psycho a slasher movie. Actually, I would consider Psycho a slasher movie for the shower scene alone. But there is a movie that came out in Italy in the early 70s called Bay of Blood, which
Hmm.
is directly ripped off by Friday the 13th. So I always thought Friday the 13th was a ripoff of Halloween, but it was actually more of a ripoff of Bay of Blood. And actually, Bay of Blood probably inspired both these films. So Bay of Blood is a major, and it's Mario Bava, by the way. So,
Ah, okay.
yeah.
I've got a key influence. I'm not sure who said it or where it came from, or maybe I just got it, but Black Christmas, a movie from 1974,
Yes. Hmm.
which was the same girl from Romeo and Juliet, Olivia Hussey
It's
is in it.
Olivia Hussey. It's got Margot Kidder. It's got a lot of good folks in it. And it's
Yeah,
on our list. I think we need to do that one Christmas.
we should. It's an
Yeah.
underrated holiday Christmas movie.
Hmm. It's not bad. It's Bob Clark. It's the guy that did Porky's and
I think
Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things.
if we're talking pre-keys or influences on this film and everything else, I think you have to say Psycho, you have to say Touch of Evil, but also Chainsaw, Night of the Living Dead, the classics that precede Last House on the Left, even because that's Home Invasion.
Right.
And Carpenter obviously had seen all of those. So I'm sure that they were in his mind in influencing this.
I was going to go back to what you said about Black Christmas. Did you know that Carpenter was a fan and actually asked Bob Clark if he could write a sequel to it?
No, but that's a good idea.
That's how this movie evolved eventually. The early seeds of it were from his desire to make a horror movie sequel to Black Christmas.
Okay. So that's a
Yeah.
huge key influence.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've got a literary one. I think we
Sure.
mentioned this in the last time in our original examination of this movie, but Ahab, um, Captain Ahab is, I mean, because that's what the Loomis character really is.
After
He's
his
obsessed with
great
his
white
white
whale.
whale.
Yeah. No, I totally get. So it would really be Moby Dick would be the
Yeah,
key, but
Moby Dick,
yeah.
but the Ahab character.
Right.
Yes.
Hmm.
Agreed.
I get that totally. I mentioned other slasher movies early, or I mentioned that Bay of Blood was early, but other slasher films besides Friday the 13th that came out were The Burning and Just Before Dawn. They're lesser known slasher movies to the general public, but they're high on radar of folks like me. So
What folks like me. What about like When a Stranger Calls? When was that? The whole babysitter telephone one.
that's a good question. I would say that was around 78 too.
Okay.
I'm not sure,
And I would
but
say the adage one that obviously imprinted on me when I was a kid and saw it was that I saw what you did.
oh
That
yeah,
that black and white one where the girls are just doing the prank call and they actually call the guy who's just murdered his wife.
that one's from like the 60s though, isn't it? It's an
Yeah,
older
yeah.
movie.
It's like late 50s, early 60s, I think.
Yeah. When a Stranger Calls was 1979. It was the following year.
Ah, okay.
I guess that's probably a slasher movie. I don't really remember anything except that scene with Carol Kane and the telephone.
Right. Well, it's the film version of that scary story you used to tell around the campfire of the killer's
Hmm.
actually calling you from upstairs. He's already
Right.
in the room. It's like the kids making out and they drive off and find the hook in
On
their
the
trunk
handle.
kind of
Yeah.
thing.
And honestly, I started off telling you that I was dictated this movie by my cousin a year before I saw it. It was like being told a ghost story. I mean, I was riveted to her
Mhm.
telling me the plot of this movie.
Well, it's interesting you said that because Carpenter has tapped into those, his oeuvre or whatever has tapped into those primal fears we have.
Mhm.
I was going to say that Halloween is a scary movie, but there's really no association with Halloween other than they're carving jack-o'-lanterns with the kids. But it could be any other. It could be Christmas for all we. I mean, there's Halloween doesn't have an influence. There's not an evil witch who summoned Michael, blah blah. Any of that kind of stuff. It's just Halloween happens to be the framework around it, but it doesn't influence the story.
Mm-hmm.
But the classic stalker who is always hunting you and won't go away, and then he does ghosts and ghosts in the fog that are
It's
coming
a haunted
after
house
you.
movie, whatever.
Yeah, like a haunted house story. He does. What was the other one?
Escape from New York was next, but then he did The Thing.
The Thing, which is body horror and that whole morphing
Sci-fi.
thing, and losing your identity, being attacked by something, a parasite.
Mm-hmm.
So there's lots of these primal things that he taps into that make these great movies.
Yeah. I think one of the reasons this one stands out so much in the quote slasher genre is what we've alluded to several times, is there's no gore. This movie is strong without the splatter effect. All those movies, The Burning, Just Before Dawn, Friday the 13th, Bay of Blood, all of those I mentioned are bloody movies. This movie is terrifying, and there's very little blood in it at all.
Right. It's suspenseful less than let's look at that effect shot. Even though your buddy Nicotero worked on this movie.
He didn't work on this movie.
He did. He did something with this movie. Yeah.
No.
Oh, no, that was the remake.
Oh, I was going to say, yeah, his first movie was like Day of the Dead in 85.
Yep.
Yeah, or Creep Show. I think he may have been on the set of Creep Show. But anyway, I still have more keys, believe it or not. You mentioned Moby Dick. I'm going to mention Jaws. And it's that whole scene where Loomis says he has black eyes, the devil's eyes. And I think about Quint going, black eyes like a doll's eyes until they roll white.
Yeah. And where it's placed, you're finally finding out the character of this, the depth of this character who's obsessed.
how it feels.
Yeah. That's great. Yeah. That's a good one.
It's a Jaws key. And Jaws came out, what, 3 years prior to this?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. And where it's placed in the film is about the same placement, too. Mm-hmm. It's in that 2/3 in, right?
2/3 in, things are happening. Yeah. I have a sci-fi key.
Okay.
Terminator.
Oh yeah,
we've also always talked about how Terminator is basically a slasher film disguised as a science fiction film.
Yep, totally.
It is about somebody stalking somebody, and this is what this movie is about. Yeah,
relentlessly coming after you the whole time. Mm-hmm. It follows. It follows is a great key. It's the same thing.
Yeah,
I've also got I've got a huge list of just ones that came directly after it that we all know about, like every single frickin' holiday horror movie.
Agreed. Totally. I even named some of them. Mother's Day, My Bloody Valentine, Friday the 13th, Christmas Evil, Thanksgiving, April Fool's Day. I mean, they're all horror movies.
And I think that's Graduation Day, too. And I think that should apply to some of the ones that have come out this century or this decade even, with like Till Death Do Us Part and the other. It's almost like those hunting your bride on her wedding night stories.
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
And another thing we've neglected to mention is that Curtis became a scream queen. She wasn't the first, but she became a very prominent scream queen in the late 70s, early 80s. And after this, she followed it with The Fog, Prom Night, and Terror Train, which are all those type of movies. Not The Fog.
Both of them.
Fog, not so
both
much,
of them on that. Fog. I've got Terror Train, Prom Night, Happy Birthday to Me, Silent Night, Deadly Night, April Fool's Day.
I've got another one that we've left out completely that you could actually get keys from, and that is Masked Killers. So you would definitely say Scream, because Ghostface is another prominent villain that is known for wearing a mask, even though it's usually a different person every movie. But But you also had, after the first Friday the 13th movie, Jason started wearing a mask. At first it was a hood, and then he went to a hockey mask.
You've got The Strangers, the movie where they just wear the burlap sacks with the cutout eyes.
Yeah.
The Scarecrow one and that Clive Barker one that Cronenberg played. Whatever that one with the button eyes, that was a
Oh my
creepy one.
God. I know what you're talking about.
Nightbreed. Nightbreed was the
Nightbreed.
movie.
I knew it started with night. Yeah.
Yeah. And you just inspired me. The one that scared me when I was a kid, this was in the late 60s, early 70s, and it was a Disney movie, almost like their version of a really twisted Sleepy Hollow. This guy was like a Revolutionary War guerrilla fighter, like a Batman, only in the Revolutionary War, but he wore a scarecrow's mask. And I think it was called The Scarecrow.
I think it's called Night of the Scarecrow.
Maybe.
There
But I
is a
remember
movie
watching
called
it.
Night of the Scarecrow. I know that.
It was a Disney movie, and I remember it was terrifying.
I don't remember it
Scared
being a
me when I
Disney
was a
movie at all.
kid. And it was the lead in it who played the Scarecrow was the guy from The Prisoner. Can't remember his name right now, but the guy, I can't remember his name. But anyway, he's the head. He was in The Prisoner.
Anyway, yeah. Another mass movie I can think of is that movie Curtains. It always scared me when I was a kid, and there's
Oh,
a
yeah.
masked killer in that one too.
Well, and I
Anyway,
think we could say, as far as masks, that whole blank mask look
like the
is
one
now
that's
kind of
used in Alice, Sweet Alice.
that one. But also, anytime you have a character, I mean, the killer has a blank mask. Now they're making it visual, like Us, where they have just the stare, and like the new one that just has a sequel, Smile, where it's the smile that is the terror in it, which brings me
Right.
back to Sardonicus because that always freaking
Yeah. Well, I
scares
think
me.
it, and I meant to start this episode off. I mean, obviously, we could sit here and list movies over and over. I just
Oh
realized
yeah,
Alice, Sweet Alice came out prior to this in '76. So that was another slasher movie with a
oh,
mask before Halloween.
before Halloween,
A
yeah.
very young Brooke Shields. Anyway, what I meant to say about this going into it is that I talked about on a Redux last year, how Night of the Living Dead to me is probably the most influential horror movie there is. This is number two. I mean,
Oh,
quite
definitely.
clearly, we could keep going with the keys because
Agreed.
this is a very influential film.
Agreed.
Yeah.
I think if you want to even talk eras or genres or whatever, then you had Psycho for the 60s. You had Night of the Living Dead for the 70s, even though it came out at the end of the 60s. And then
Yeah.
you had Halloween for the 80s.
Well,
Those were,
I mean, they both came out 10 years apart, 68 and 78. So
yep.
they influenced the following decade.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Night of the Living Dead influenced the 70s and Halloween influenced the 80s. Yeah, for sure.
And if we wanted to push it further, we could do no. The next year after this. So in my notes, I've got guerrilla filmmaking. What other movie? And it's Evil Dead,
Yeah.
because they were the same way. With you got to shoot what you can. Everybody's there to help. The same guy that's editing it is playing the monster.
Mhm.
It's everything we can do to get this
And
project
they
done.
utilize whoever's on set that night to do
Oh
something.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
As you
You're
can attest to.
yeah, yeah. You're a bush tonight. You're a bush's
Yeah.
shadow.
You
Be
need
over
to
there.
yank this door open when I yell.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Yeah. I guess that's going to probably wind it up. I mean, that's
It
all the keys
should.
I'm going to list. Like I said, we could probably go on, but I mean, that's a lot.
It is. And I stress to everybody, even if you've watched this movie as much as us 2 dozen times, go watch it again. Just sit down at night,
In a couple of
snuggle
nights.
in, watch it, because it is so good. It's just so good. We didn't do tropes. Let me do tropes real quick before we quit
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
and see if you can add to it. So the tropes that I have, and I'm sure you can add to it, are have sex and you die, which became a huge thing in the 80s and 90s.
I think that's a coincidental thing, though, because in these movies, they know that there have to be murders, but they also know the audience is expecting a little bit of nudity or sex. So it
Yeah,
just
they
kinda
take from
happens.
that. Yeah, they're inspired by that 60s drive-in sexploitation
Right.
thing.
But a lot of people connect especially with Friday the 13th, that sex equals death. Whereas I think that they're just both very prominent in these type movies.
It became a cliche, a trope, which leads to the second one, which is the virgin is the hero. The girl that doesn't do what everybody else does,
Right.
doesn't do the drugs, doesn't have sex,
Has a crush on somebody, a secret crush. Yeah.
They become and that's my next trope, final girl, which is
Right.
this whole surviving girl trying to be as strong as she can and fight against it. Even that, and that's in Alien and everything. It's not just
Yeah, and in
horror
all
movies.
honesty, other than the final girl, I would say that John probably established those tropes with this film.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm totally stating that. I've got
I mean, there
the
were
whole
final
trope
girls in
of-
other horror movies, but I still say that the whole virginal sex thing was definitely established in this.
and I've got the whole trope of the collection of bodies near the end
Body
of the
count,
movie.
body count, body count. Ooh, ah. Yeah, because you know when she's walking over to that house across the street, it's coming.
Oh,
You know,
yeah.
It's like, where are they going to be? The bodies are going to start popping out.
And they're going and literally popping and flying out of everywhere.
Right.
The indestructible killer that keeps coming back and
Mhm.
keeps coming back and keeps coming back.
Very Jaws.
Having the action, it's almost like a Stephen King trope that was layered onto films, which was having the action in a familiar place rather than the big Gothic mansion or Dracula's castle or the windmill or the laboratory or whatever. It's having it right next door in the library or in your neighborhood or at summer camp, which is supposed to be kumbaya.
That's very Stephen King and very Richard Matheson, bringing
Very.
the old horror into the modern world.
Yes. And my last one that I've got under tropes is a town with a haunted house.
Yeah.
Because
The
they
Myers
avoid
house.
the Myers house.
Yeah.
So
Hey,
line you
Lonnie.
always-
You knew I was going to go there because that's one of my favorite lines of his.
Get your ass away.
Get your ass away from there.
Thank you guys so much for this. Oh my gosh. I've been having so much fun. Tim,
Yeah.
it's always good when we have a good one, but we also have fun when we have bad ones.
We have fun with bad ones, but like I said, this one deserved a redux for sure.
It did. It did.
I think we were more collected and we have our format, even though we went wow with keys.
Yes. But hey, how can you not with a classic like this? So
Right.
That's what Tim and I think out there, watcher listeners. And what do you guys think? Let us know down below. Do you like Halloween? Did we miss something? Is there something you really like that we didn't mention? Let us know. We'd love to hear from you guys. Also, if you are new to us, we'd love to get in touch with you and stay in touch with you. So subscribe, ring the bell, join, do all that. And as we have said a couple of times, we do have our own website. You can go over there and catch all of our previous episodes. Just scroll through and look at or search a movie that you might want, and maybe we've done it. Hopefully we have. If not, we've got a full season ahead of us here. We're going to do some more, and I guess until Halloween. No, it's Halloween in 3 days, right? So yeah.
Hey, Dave.
Until then, yeah.
It really was the boogeyman, wasn't it?
It really was.
Trick or treat.
Trick or treat. See you, my friend.
All right, bye.
Bye.
You can't start the car. Johnny